In Midsomer Mallow, the members of the Residents Association are being murdered just as Cully tries to organize a school reunion. Some people will do just about anything to get out of dinner with Cully. We're talking cultural appropriation.
The Doomsday Book.
And why it's best to just let the school friends stay where they are on this episode of
Welcome to Midsomer.
Hello, and welcome to Midsomer, the podcast where we dissect all the mysteries, the murders, and the many weird things about the long-running hit TV show Midsomer Murders. I'm your host, Eric Buscher, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Eileen Becker. Hey, Eileen, can you believe we've been doing this for a year now?
Eric, time flies when you're changing detective sergeants every month.
That is true.
Today we are talking about Bad Tidings, the second episode of the 7th series. It originally aired January 4th, 2004, and was directed by Peter Smith and written by Peter Hammond. Hey, the two Peters! Let's put on our dancing shoes.
Spoiler warning, we'll be discussing the events of this episode, including the identity of the murderer. So if you haven't watched it yet and don't want to know who done it, pause this and go watch it. We'll still be here when you get back.
By the way, welcome to Midsomer.
In the village of Midsomer Mallow, it's Spanish evening, and the village is in full cringe mode as they dance in traditional Spanish dresses and matador outfits. In the middle of the dance floor, Greg and Fiona Thompson start arguing about money, giving everyone a free show. Fiona storms out, and as she makes her way home through the village, someone is following her, someone who will stab her to death just outside her house. The next day, Mary Pierce and her dog Monty walk through Cheney's field and find Fiona's body, laid there with a rose placed in her mouth. Barnaby and his new partner, Scott, are called in. Greg tells them that he thought she had spent the night in the spare bedroom. He thinks that Fiona's membership in the local resident association might have been the reason for her death because all those people hate each other. In fact, Mary is a member, and when she talks to members Donald Tew and Shirley Bannett, she says they should have wished for Fiona's death. I mean, if they had that kind of ability, play the lotto. Barnaby and Scott interview the members. Mary says Fiona liked to argue, and Donald says that he was the last person to see her alive as he was smoking outside when she stormed out of the Spanish evening. He also tells them about a strange, eerie squeaking he heard echoing through the village afterwards. Perhaps it was the squeak of the cart of Jacob Stoke, a local odd job man who was out the night of the murder and had an argument with Fiona a few days previous. They also interview Resident Association Chairperson Charles Rust, an arrogant jerk who seems quite thrilled about Fiona's death. He claims to not have seen anything, and he happens to have a squeaky wheelbarrow. Meanwhile, at the Barnabys, Cully is trying to organize a reunion with her old school friends, Cassie Woods, Rachel Rose, and Lynn Spearman. Apparently, she needed to come home to do this? They made a vow to meet up 10 years after they left school, but Cully is the only one who seems to have lost touch, as the others are all still in contact with each other. She reached out to Cassie, who now runs her family farm along with her brother Noel. They mentioned that seeing Rachel might be tricky and that she had a baby 3 years ago, but no one knows who the father is. Lynn's older husband Mark comes home from his job in London, and Lynn tells him that their next-door neighbor Fiona was murdered. When Barnaby and Scott talk to them, they say they were home the night of the murder, but heard nothing. Turns out Mark is a former member of the association, but he hated them too. What are those meetings like? They also had a run-in with the odd job men when they refused to pay him. Maybe Fiona's death is a mistaken identity? Lynn's also a blonde. The detectives find Stokes' workshop, and Barnaby mishandles evidence. Meanwhile, every night in the village, the squeaks continue, causing everyone to freak out. In order to celebrate Fiona's death, despite her death, Charles insists that the village's garden day go on as planned. The association seems upset by this, and Mary tries riling up the others against Charles, even going so far as to suggest they should wish for Charles's death. Tom and Joyce, along with Scott, decide to check out the garden day, while Cully meets up with Cassie and Noel, who force her to come with them for a surprise. After schmoozing some judges, Charles retires to his home when someone breaks in and murders him gruesomely. All right, let's take a little tourist info to Midsomer Mallow.
Yeah, we talked about Midsomer Mallow in the episode Judgment Day. It's a quaint community founded in the 3rd century AD, and the village has tried for most perfect village, which was rather unsuccessful since somebody was murdered there. And then it also seems to suffer from a shortage of WD-40 because everybody has squeaky wheels. With the murder at Garden Day, hopefully they stop these events. But they are still selling pitchforks in a Garden Day tent. The Orlando Bloom special, though maybe not the elderberry and apricot wine anymore.
So, yeah, in that episode, Midsomer Mallow famously in the Orlando Bloom Pitchfork episode, we met the village committee in that episode, and that was only a couple of years before this episode. So do you think the resident association is just the upgrade to the village community, or is this something completely separate, in which case there's too many bosses in this village?
Yeah, it's weird that they changed it from the village community to the resident association. Maybe they just thought the rebranding would help after, the murders.
After one of the members of the previous committee was guilty of murder.
Yeah. It's like changing Facebook to Meta.
Yeah. So with the resident association, who's scheduling these events? Why is Spanish Evening, which seems to be cost these residents a lot of money in these elaborate costumes, 2 days before Garden Day?
And Spanish Evening seemed to take place in the church hall, which I guess these events do. It was kind of a little on the cheap side for it to spend a lot of money on the outfits. But let's talk about this Spanish Evening.
Oh, this is, now this episode came out in what did we, when did this episode, what did we say? 2004.
4, yeah.
So this episode came out in 2004. Now this is something that probably seemed okay 2 decades ago that, even, just now does seem massively inappropriate. Especially considering the very clear whiteness of everybody involved.
Well, I mean, yeah. And the fact that, and we won't get into the long history of
cultural
contention between contention between Spain and England. Maybe they had a point in the evening where they sunk the Spanish Armada.
And where did they get all those matador outfits?
It was every possible cliche you could imagine of any kind of Spanish or Hispanic country available, because one guy had a pencil mustache drawn on.
He had a pencil thin mustache. They didn't have he had a polo shirt on.
Yeah.
Maybe he was a band guy.
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of a mariachi type band, a little more Mexican than Spanish yeah. I'm not sure what the dances were. Maybe they were an attempt at a paso doble.
Yeah.
But anyway, Spanish Evening, lots of fun till somebody dies.
Yeah, well, I'm shocked that Charles didn't just show up in brownface. It seemed on brand for him.
Yeah.
So the big hinge point on this episode is it's the first appearance of D.S. Scott, a character who is infamous in the annals of Midsomer Murders. He's around for 2 seasons, gets a cold, and never comes back. I like to think that he's Midsomer Murders' greatest unsolved murder.
That could be.
I mean, it's just a solo murder. They can't solve solo murders. It has to be a double or triple homicide.
Yeah. So. Tom didn't murder any of those other detective sergeants. Oh, wait, did I give away who the murderer was?
We've discussed in a previous episode, the actor has said that he basically got cocky, asked for more money, and was and said if he wasn't going to get paid, he was going to walk, and they wouldn't pay him, and he walked. But there's a lot of, I think that, how does this episode really set up the Scott character that we see for the next 2 series?
Yeah, he does come across as the city boy out of place, which is played on a bit throughout his tenure as detective sergeant. He's got a bit of an arrogance to him. He has kind of a way that he has learned to play the game that is a little more obsequious than is played in Midsomer. And Tom is not having it. Cully's not having it. Joyce is fine with it.
I think Cully kind of falls for it too. He's definitely
he's a charmer. Yeah.
He's a good looking dude. He's a charmer. In that one shot where we see him without a shirt on, he's clearly fit.
Yeah.
but he's arrogant. He's brusque, and those are traits that stay on, I think, through through a large chunk of his tenure. Um, going into sort of the having to train down the bad qualities, part of that mentor-mentee relationship that Tom
Hmm.
sets up. You saw that with Troy. You see it less and less. I feel like you get Barnaby and Nelson. You saw it a little bit, but not
Hmm.
so much with Winters. Not so much with Jones. Barnaby clearly not a fan of Scott off the bat. You don't get Sundays off with me.
Yeah. But I did like the way John Hopkins portrayed the character, and I love the scene where it is that Sunday and he's exhausted and he gives that little speech. And I thought he played that very well. And you really it gets your sympathy on him a bit more.
Yeah, except you didn't get Barnaby's sympathy on him, and Barnaby's like, yeah, I don't care.
Yeah.
which is why I respect Barnaby. Also, did you notice that when he later in the episode when he's trying to find Cully, and he goes to Rachel's house,
Mm-hmm.
and he does when he knocks on the door, he goes da 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 da.
Dump. Yeah.
Just like, you're on duty, man.
Was he officially on duty? I don't
Yes.
know. He was drinking beer. He was drinking beer earlier that day.
So was Tom.
Yep.
So was Tom. But they, as Tom points out, you're always on duty when you work for Tom Barnaby.
That is true.
We had a strange, not quite a strange kill in the actual stabbing, but Fiona's body found with a flower in her mouth.
Yeah. And also an apple in the mouth of Charles, which to me, I mean, they talk about an apple for the teacher. For me, it brought up, since he was a doctor, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. But apparently it didn't.
Yep. Also, I also was thinking, I didn't chalk it up to strange kill because we have actually seen apples in the mouths.
Yeah.
In a previous episode when we were with the Cookie Factory one.
Yeah.
So, I will say, I'm not trying to Fiona had an ugly scream face when she's getting stabbed. That is not a good face.
I don't know if I would look really glamorous if I were being stabbed, just to be fair.
You want to find out?
My cats have stabbed my legs a lot as they're, sitting on my lap and securing their position. So yeah, I'm sure I don't look all that glamorous with that happening. So we have actually a pretty good cast on this one, I thought.
Very good. Why don't you start us off with the cast highlights?
All right. John Norrington played Smoking Treasure Donald II. He was a member of the Royal Shakespeare Company and was a regular actor on British television for over 40 years before he passed away in 2007. You can see him in the 1968 film version of A Midsummer Night's Dream, Canterbury Tales, the original Father Brown, Rollerball, A Private Function, Doctor Who, Inspector Morse, and Casualty. His final role was as a vicar in the film adaptation of Ian McEwan's Atonement. Helen Lindsay played Mary Pierce, the village's prayer for death. She was born in India in 1929 and started appearing on screen starting in the 50s. She had roles in Great Expectations, The Avengers, Jane Eyre, Upstairs Downstairs, The Pallisers, Little Lord Fauntleroy, and Mission Impossible. She also appeared in Jim Henson's The Storytellers, which has earned her own page on the Muppets fan wiki. I found her delightful in this episode, and her reaction to the second death to be really authentic. There was no over-the-top screaming. She just looked so shocked and pale, and she looked like she was going to throw up. And I just really, for me, that stood out.
Yeah, she was fantastic. So Michael Simpkins played grieving Gary Thompson. He's a graduate of RADA. He's appeared in Chalkface, A Fatal Inversion, The House of Elliot, Topsy-Turvy, Wild, Foyle's War, V for Vendetta, The Crown, and most recently in Miss Scarlet and the Duke. In 2004, around the time of this very episode, he published his autobiography, What's My Motivation?, about the life of a jobbing actor. He's married to Julia Deakin, who appeared in Midsomer Murders in the episode Midsomer Rhapsody. So it's a true Midsummer tradition, keeping it in the family. Pause for laugh. Hilton McRae was devoted husband Matthew Spearman. He's another RSC member who has an affinity for avant-garde and political theater. You know, things like Mama Mia and Miss Saigon. He's appeared in both. He also appeared in Return of the Jedi, The French Lieutenant's Woman, Greystoke, Max Headroom, Mansfield Park, The Darkest Hour, Macbeth, Chernobyl. Did I mention Max Headroom?
Love Max Headroom.
He's married to the actress Lindsay Duncan, who's never done Midsomer. So he's the champion in that family.
Yeah. And he was on Max Headroom.
Max Headroom.
Helen Grace played prominent local comedian Lynn Spearman. Ha ha! One of her first major roles was on the soap Brookside, playing a character who begins an incestuous relationship with her younger brother. Incest? That role caused a lot of controversy in the mid-90s, although it seems like it was just her auditioning for Midsomer. She followed that up with roles in Roger Roger, Bad Girls, Killing Them Softly, Respectable, The Bill, and most recently, Hetty Feather. Christine Moore was doll store proprietor Shirley Bennett. She appeared in the shows Angels, The Practice, Brookside, The Governor, and Wild. Her last role was in 2007 on Coronation Street. There's not a lot out there on Moore, so I guess she retired?
Yeah, she doesn't seem to have any kind of social media presence or any kind of. So my guess is she's probably retired.
Yeah. I liked how she had the same haircut that Cully did.
Daniel Crowder played Noel Woods. He's a working actor who's appeared in Ladies of Letters, Coronation Street, The Bill, The Cockfields, and the infamous film flop version of The Avengers. According to his online profile, he's licensed to drive farm vehicles, so he really should have been helping his sister more in this episode.
Seriously.
Nina Mark played first victim Fiona Thompson. Now, this is actually her last credit listed on IMDb. Prior to this, she appeared on Poirot, Lovejoy, Drop the Dead Donkey, Revelations, Brookside, and Holby City. Since 1998, she's been married to Jeff Rawle, who's appeared on Midsomer Murders twice, and seems to have retired from acting, possibly to be a stay-home mom to their kids. Again, not a lot of information out there.
Now, with our return visitors, we have several. John Standing played chairman and head jerk Charles Rust, and also appeared in the Dogleg Murders. His real name is Sir John Ronald Leon, 4th Baronet, and is a descendant of the builder of Bletchley Park. His first major break was a 1955 performance of Titus Andronicus, directed by Peter Brooks and starring Laurence Olivier and Vivien Leigh. He appeared in The Elephant Man, the 60s classic TV series The Avengers, Space, 1999, Murder, She Wrote, The Crown, V for Vendetta, and in the first episode of Game of Thrones playing the deceased Jon Arryn, making him that show's first murder victim. Esther Hall played Cully's friend, Cassie Woods. She comes back in the episode Last Man Out. Her first big role was in the original Queer as Folk, followed by roles in Spooks, Waking the Dead, Rome, Black Mirror, and Killing Eve. She's probably best known for appearing in a series of ads for communications company BT with the actor Chris Marshall of Death in Paradise fame. The characters met, fell in love, and married over 6 years of commercials. Also, according to her Wikipedia page, Hall at some point met with and spoke to Nelson Mandela about Iraq. No clue what that's about.
No clue either.
I don't think she solved it.
No, she didn't. Although, was there really a big issue between South Africa and Iraq? Paul Thornley appeared in the previous episode of this series, The Green Man. He played the same character, Sergeant Gill. Now, this is one of his first credits, and he's gone on to be a journeyman actor appearing in Life Begins, Ashes to Ashes, The Bill, Poirot, the film adaptation of Les Mis, Father Brown, The Crown, and Agatha Raisin. Alex Belcourt played the WPC in this episode. Now, she's basically plays the same character under different titles in the episodes Sins of Commission, The Straw Woman, Things That Go Bump in the Night, and Last Year's Model. Now, she's done voice work for the series Jane and the Dragon and Skyland. Her last credit was in 2008. Since then, she seems to have become a yoga instructor in Cheltenham. I feel like these two characters just trying to populate the world of Midsomer. Where's their spinoff?
Well, at least they get a credit, unlike the poor uncredited actor who played squeaky-wheeled handyman Jacob Stokes. Sorry, man, no lines, no credit.
That's
Not
right.
even on IMDb.
And time for our village star.
All right. Our village star for the week is Ruth Jones, who played Rachel Rose. Ruth hails from Wales, where she attended Porthcawl Comprehensive School at the same time as the actor Rob Brydon. After graduating school, she toured for 6 months in an adaptation of The Marriage of Figaro. However, acting dried up after the tour and she actually considered becoming a solicitor for a time. But eventually she got more and more work, and she memorably appeared in the film East is East and the show Fat Friends, where she met James Corden. Jones and Corden would go on to create and star in the hit sitcom Gavin and Stacy, along with Bryden. The series won several awards and even generated a #1 hit single when Jones and Bryden recorded Islands in the Stream, which I did watch on YouTube. After Gavin and Stacy, she created the show Stella that ran until 2017. She's also written 3 best-selling novels. This appearance will be 3 years before Gavin and Stacy, so we're really seeing her on the cusp. As we do with so many actors, they either get these really great character actors who are older, kind of in the Murder, She Wrote tradition, or we get people like Ruth Jones and Orlando Bloom and Henry Cavill at the beginning of their careers.
I think she's really good in the episode, even though she's only in the second half.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a very memorable turn. Obviously, like I said, she would be recognizable at this point, but it really, in like 3 years' time, Gavin and Stacy really became her breakthrough. That was the thing that really kind of took both her and Corden's career to the next level. She hasn't really been acting in anything regularly since Stella ended. So I'd love to see her back on a regular series. Either something she creates, or maybe she's going to take it easy and just do somebody else's stuff.
Yeah, she may have, just sat out the whole COVID thing and is working on something, or maybe she just likes writing these novels.
Yeah, she had one of these novels appeared in the last couple of years. So we're going to take a break here, and then we're going to be back with the second half of this episode. And we're back. Now let's talk about the second half of Bad Tidings.
All right, I'll be honest with you, sir. Maybe I don't like the countryside. Maybe I can't tell one herd of chickens from another. I am prepared to put up with it for the time being.
Oh, you're prepared to put up with it?
Yeah, because I'm willing to learn. And all right, if that's a tip, so what? I'm the one who has to live with it. You see, with all due respect, sir, I've been involved with 2 murders from the moment I arrived here. I haven't had time to suss out the laundrette or where the local post office is, and I'm tired. And it's Sunday.
And your tie is crooked.
Thank you, sir.
And you don't get Sundays off when you work with me.
Charles was stabbed to death with an apple placed in his mouth. Considering he lives in a former schoolhouse, maybe the apple is for teacher? Also, the killer wrote that it was awards day on the chalkboard and rang the awards bell. Mary had discovered the body. She heard the bell and thought it was Charles showing off, so she went to wish him death to his face. Well, you get what you wish for. Barnaby sends Scott to hunt down the missing Cully and make sure that she's okay. Cassie and Noel have taken Cully to a nearby lake where they meet up with Lynn. And Rachel! However, her daughter Lily isn't with her. Rachel seems weirdly hostile, and after suggesting they go for a swim, she gets into a fight with Lynn, and when Cully tries to break them up, Rachel practically drowns Cully. Scott shows up just in time to help her. Maybe Rachel didn't like the creepy doll Cully tried to bring by her place earlier? The detectives uncover that Fiona used to work for Charles when he was the local doctor and would have had access to all his medical records. The next day, Stokes' body is found burnt up in his cart. Next to him is the creepy doll Cully bought for Lily. Tom goes to Rachel's to check things out and meets Lily, who looks nothing like Rachel. Cully apparently gave the doll to Noel to give to Rachel, but instead Noel gave it to Lynn? Turns out the blonde baby is actually Lynn's child and not Rachel's. She had an affair with Noel and pretended to go to New Zealand when she gave birth. It's a thing. The friends have all agreed that Rachel should take care of the baby. But now Rachel is acting like she's the true mother of Lily. Because she is. She is taking care and raising a child. We're going to get into that.
Yeah, we will get into that.
Cully goes to Rachel's and we discover the source of the squeak. It's Lily's pram. Rachel pushes her around at night to keep her a secret. She's planning to leave the village and take Lily with her to give her a proper life. The reality is, Lynn could care less about her daughter, and Noel is too codependent with Cassie. Rachel tells Cully to leave, where she runs into Lynn standing outside with a knife. Lynn attempts to kill Cully, but Rachel knocks her out. Barnaby and Scott put Lynn in the interrogation room. Here's the reveal. Lynn doesn't like people telling tales about her, and she gets real violent about it. That's why she bullied Cully back in school, because Cully would snitch on her. Of course she did.
Mm-hmm.
Fiona was trying to blackmail her, so Lynn hunted her across the village and killed her. She killed Charles because he knew too much. She gave herself an alibi by being seen by the Barnabys at Rachel's house, then racing over and killing him. The rose and apples were just jokes, because she's funny.
So funny.
Afterwards, Cully invites her parents and Scott to the restaurant she was planning to eat at with her friends for their reunion. They raise a toast to absent friends, and Barnaby stares at Scott, wishing like hell he was Troy. All right, so we got to talk Lynn.
Let's talk Lynn.
So can we all agree that this was clearly not her first murder?
No, yeah, and obviously she was a bully, and bullies don't generally stop being bullies unless something really serious happens to them to stop being a bully.
The way she just kind of instantly goes to stabbing people to death, and like, I just feel like there's probably some unsolved murders somewhere that she's clearly responsible for.
Yeah, I mean, maybe even in Badger's Drift.
Yeah, I mean, you just don't start at this level.
No,
you work your way up.
Yeah, probably a few dead cats and dogs and whatever.
First of all, the whole thing with the kid being kept a secret, I just find the whole thing kind of absurd that like all these friends were like, no, give the child to Rachel. Well, why Rachel? Was Rachel wanting a child? Did she seem more motherly?
Mm-hmm.
We never really get to see her raise the child or be like, see if she's a good mom or not. But she's clearly the only one who's caring about that kid at all.
Yeah, it is a weird situation because, she apparently, goes away to London. Why she comes back is weird.
Yeah.
She could have obviously just said she adopted a child rather than it was, or said, oh, it's just artificial insemination or whatever. I mean, that was around. I know people who have done that. They are single and they either adopt a child or they have one from a sperm bank. It's not unusual. Those would have been much easier explanations than hiding a kid who, by the way, just because she's blonde doesn't mean she's not her daughter. I mean, my mom, who had very dark hair, was a blonde as a child. So
the child looks a lot more like Lynn. In this case, I could see exactly. I was like, that kid looks like Lynn. But it just kind of also goes to this idea of, well, why were all the friends so protective of Lynn? Like first of all, why is Cassie and Noel involved in this at all? It's none of their business. Like,
well, he is the father.
He is the father, but he also could, like, they have all abdicated their responsibilities of being parents.
Yeah.
And Rachel is the one who was taking care of the kid. They are basically saying, well, Lily needs to stay in the house so it doesn't give the story away, which is like, they're selfish and cruel to this child. Rachel is the only one who's looking out for this child's interest.
Either the child that is the only mother the child has known, or there has to be some legal documentation that gives her parentage of the child. It's weird.
I have the only theory I could come up with is that everyone knows Lynn's a psycho, and that Lynn will kill people if they don't give her what she wants. And that's the only thing I can think of it, especially why Rachel was trying to beat the crap out of Lynn at the lake. It was very frustrating and weird, and which is Midsomer style. But I just was Rachel seemed to be the good mom, and I couldn't quite understand why she was so freaking hostile all the time. To Cully. Yeah. You think Cully would be the confidant. Cully's you could tell Cully just look, just help me get out of this.
Yeah. Yeah. But she doesn't. I mean, you see that in actually another episode of this season, The Green Man, where the murderer finds Cully very easy to confide in. So
yeah. Cully's friends clearly didn't like Cully.
It's so weird. It's like, how did these people get together? And I know friendships are all kind of weird and strange, and why are these people friends is a kind of a recurring theme in real life. But it just seemed really weird. And her reaction to them at the picnic seemed weird. Yeah. It's like they're all kind of gathering around and she's just standing there until Noel says, come join us. And it's like, what's up her bum.
But I think it's also kind of goes to the fact that Cully is like shocked that her friends seem to have lives. She is at the top.
Mhm.
She's like, Cassie and Noel are like running a farm, and Lynn is married and Rachel's pregnant. She's like, can you believe it? And it's like, it's been 10 years since school. They've all moved on with their lives. You're still basically living half your time at home with your parents. You're the one that's the weirdo. You're the one who can't seem to find a career, hasn't gotten married and can't move on. It's like, it's not your friend's fault.
Yeah.
I thought the vow was a little weird. Like, oh, in 10 years, we're going to have dinner?
Yeah. Yeah, that was kind of, I mean, it's like, he usually say, hey, yeah, let's just kind of get together,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, they've clearly all been kept in touch. So
Yeah.
again, this is a Cully thing. It's like, Cully has purposely or whatnot just stopped talking to this group of people.
Yeah, she didn't keep up with them. They all kept up with each other. Yeah.
And which might explain like a little bit of the Rachel's annoyance with her is just like, hey, look, you disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get to come back and act like, you bringing us together. It's like, you're just kind of horning in.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Also, why did Cully have to come home to organize this? Her parents didn't like both Tom and Joyce are like, we don't care.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, I don't remember. Yeah. Joyce is all, I don't remember any of these people.
Yeah. Jumping back to Lynn,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think about her sense of humor?
Yeah. I didn't see a whole lot of her sense of humor. I didn't see a lot of Noel's sense of humor either. I mean, the whole playing pranks thing in school seemed very kind of
Cruel.
juvenile and cruel. Yeah, putting things in people's lockers and stuff. I mean, that's a horrible thing to do. I mean, he was a bully too, basically. No wonder. Maybe that's why he and Lynn got along. They were both bullies.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Again, it's like Cully seems to have the worst taste in people.
Yeah. One thing that I thought was a little undercooked that I thought they could, and you mentioned it, is that the fact that Lynn and Fiona look a lot alike. And they don't really play on that. Like, could that have been somebody going after Lynn? The handyman could have been going after Lynn.
I feel like that's something that was probably left on the cutting room floor. It's a very obvious. I mean, even going to the idea of like the first time we see Lynn's house, it's Matthew, who doesn't have a sense of humor, or just doesn't find apples in the mouths of dead people funny. Coming home and can't get in because all the locks on their door are locked. Right. So it was like clearly they were indicating there was some kind of like worry about all the like that they were worried about something because they had all those locks on the door.
Yeah.
And I really feel like there was probably a red herring involved of like, oh, well, how do we know that like Stokes wasn't trying to kill Lynn because they had that fight?
Yeah. And they didn't pay him for work that he did, by the way. Mm-hmm. So he should have been paid.
No wonder he's ripping people off.
Yeah.
Speaking of Stokes, can we talk a little bit? Let's jumping into some of the detective work this episode. So when Barnaby and Scott go to his workplace and they find a knife that could easily have been the murder weapon.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like,
they pick it up, putting their fingerprints on it, and then start grinding it.
You're grinding any blood residue off.
Like, that's potential. That is such a mishandling of evidence.
Yeah.
We did see policemen at work this episode. We had some of the, as we mentioned, the recurring characters, some background police officers there to provide information. They're searching, they're taping off stuff. It was nice to see that. You don't always see that in these episodes. A couple of Barnaby things. Why exactly did he go to Rachel's?
My take on that was that he was starting to put the 3-year together thing. Lynn had been away and supposedly in New Zealand 3 years ago, and then Rachel had a baby 3 years ago.
Okay, but then
and I think he wanted to like at least stop by and maybe see the baby or the child.
But again, there's no evidence that this is directly linked to this investigation. There's no evidence that this has anything to do with it. They find the creepy doll, but there's a whole shop full of creepy dolls that, let's face it, they all looked alike. They all looked alike. One creepy doll is pretty much the same as the other.
You just didn't grow up with dolls and give them all their own names, so you're wrong there. But
now who's being creepy?
well, Tom probably would have not have remembered the doll, to be honest, in its specifics. Yeah.
Well, it just feels like this is like Tom, like when Tom gets that weird sort of random
Tom sense.
Tom sense. His Tom sense is tingling, and he goes to Rachel's, but there was no realistic reason for him to go there.
Yeah.
Not one that is ever explained in this episode.
No.
I also thought it was really funny that when Tom is at the door for the Spearmans, he was like, DSI, Tom Barnaby. And then he like has to kind of dig in his pocket and his hand kind of almost gets stuck. You can see his hands kind of almost stuck in the pocket trying to get the badge out. And I was just like, why wouldn't you just have the badge ready? They're going to ask to see it.
They're going to ask to see it. Yeah.
Just have it ready, Tom. Come on. You're professional.
You don't do the silly knock.
Not much of a corner this week. Bullard's around for some info dumps, but he doesn't even really get to do any charming Bullard things.
No, he doesn't really get to have much screen time this time, but always nice to see George.
It is. We found a real fun sort of angle for Eileen's History Corner this week. So Eileen, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, well, there's obviously not a lot of history in this episode beyond Cully's fraught history with her school friends, but Tom Barnaby makes a reference to the Doomsday Book, and that Cheney's Field is mentioned in it. It doesn't impress Scott, though, but what is the Doomsday Book? So, almost 20 years after the Norman Conquest in 1066, King William I, also known as William the Conqueror, decided that he wanted a survey of his new realm, mainly to catalog his lands and for tax purposes. Written in medieval Latin, it was completed in 1086 and included parts of both England and Wales, but they never got around to doing London and parts of northern England. Over 250,000 people are chronicled in the book as heads of households, listed under the manor held by tenants-in-chief. Many urban dwellers were not tallied, because this was very much a feudal document. It wasn't called the Doomsday Book until the late 12th or early 13th century. Doomsday is the Day of Judgment for Christians, and this name reflected how the English quickly came to hold the book in awe as a definitive chronicle. It's also known as the Great Survey, but it has never had an official title. Nothing on that spine. As a tally of feudal lands, everything was ultimately considered the possession of the king, and everyone else was his tenant. So his own outright lands were listed first in each county section, followed by the held lands and their tenants. Part of this tally would have been lands that had become known as common lands. They were part of the held estates of lords or churches, but peasants had certain rights to use those lands from at least the time of Edward the Confessor. So that would be the Saxon times. Peasants could use the lands to pasture their animals, to fish, to dig up sod for fuel, to extract certain minerals and stones, to collect wood from certain trees, and to turn out their pigs in the autumn to forage. Those who had the rights to use these lands were known as commoners, and the lands were highly regulated as to what animals could be pastured and what resources could be taken. Until the 17th century, millions of acres were common. But changes in agricultural practices led landlords to start enclosing parts of the land once held as common. The Enclosure Act of 1773 went against centuries of law and common practice to allow the enclosure of lands. Currently, there are over 8,000 registered commons in England. The Countryside and Rights of Way Act of 2000 gave the public the freedom to roam on all registered common lands in England and Wales, which is an issue that crops up on occasion in Midsomer murders. For Americans, the concept of the town commons is an offshoot of this idea, and Boston Common was used as a very traditional common until it was designated as a park. Cows were not formally banned from Boston Common until 1830. Fortunately, ducklings are still allowed.
Aww. Well, that brings us to everything that we kind of wanted to discuss. Any final thoughts on this, Eileen?
I do like this episode, but I do think it's not one of the stronger ones of season 7, which to me is one of the best seasons they've had. We've done 2 episodes from season 7, both of which have been kind of more on the traditional, they're okay, they're good, but they're not great. I do think there's actually 2 great, maybe 3 great episodes in season 7. But it, it's a fine episode. We get a good introduction to D.S. Scott, and we we get to see a young Ruth Jones.
Yeah, I think I agree with you that it's probably like a solid B episode. It's entertaining, good and creepy in areas, not necessarily the most thought through. I like the introduction of Scott in the sense that it, gives a good level of tension for him and Barnaby to play off of.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, it's a B. It's entertaining. It's not. It doesn't really land in the annals of Midsomer greatness.
No.
Well, that's everything we wanted to talk about. We want to thank all of you for listening. If you had anything you wanted to discuss about Bad Tidings or Midsomer Murders in general, please feel free to email us at welcometomidsomer@gmail.com. If you want us to use that email in the show, just say so in the email. We're also Welcome to Midsomer on Facebook and Instagram. If you like what you heard, please consider subscribing to us or rating and reviewing us on iTunes. It really helps people find us. Also, tell all your friends about us. We will be back next month, so we hope you will join us again for that as we take the road out of Midsomer. I want to thank you once again for listening and remind you that in Midsomer, school reunions can be murder.
And usually are.
Welcome to Midsomer is produced by Eric Buscher and Eileen Becker. All clips in this podcast are used in compliance with the U.S. Copyrights Act, fair use exception for criticism and commentary. Our logo and podcast art was designed by Smeedrai. Our theme music is by the infamous Space.